Welcome back to the show. Check out these headlines. XRP holders can earn 10% APY yield, baby. It's coming, and it's coming in a big way. First, it was BRICS. And how about the EU? Are they about to launch a digital euro in the XRP ledger? We're about to unpack it. How about a $5 XRP by October? How about somebody roll that beautiful intro?
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. You can follow us on X, YouTube, and DigPerspectives.com for exclusive content. Right now, $3.99 trillion market cap for crypto. The market is off by 3.7%, bleeding heavily right now. Everything is falling like a manhole cover from the sky. 112,900 plus for Bitcoin, 4,200 plus for Ethereum. XRP drops to the number 4 spot from number 3 to 285. We're off 4.5 on the 24. We're off 4.9 on the 7-day. Look at the range of price here. Range between $2.77 and $3. And I just have to say, it went all the way to $2.77. I said this in my morning video. Not one of you called me. I take personal offense to it. I really do. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Nonetheless, I will say this. I'm excited, and I can still be enthusiastic, and I can still be tongue-in-cheek about it all because the whole market is off. And obviously, we're waiting for the legislation and everything else to be done. So it makes sense to me that we would see this kind of up and down movement in price. And again, it's across the entire market itself. So why would I be shaken by seeing any of that? If anything, I'm really trying to wrestle with, am I buying another little bag? If I'm buying the dip, then it's about how much. And I only got so much that I could use to do it anyway. So, I mean, I'll wrestle with that later. Nonetheless, let's take a look at this. It's iTrustCapital. And let me tell you something. By the way, they have the best crypto, gold, silver IRAs on the planet, bar none. It's not even up for discussion. And if you're not taking advantage of this, just very quickly, think of the moment that we're in for a second. We're getting ready to get legislation that's about to embrace these assets and the digital asset space broadly for the rest of time. You're watching the birth of a new asset class. Yes, and you could be rolling your 401k into iTrustCapital so you take max advantage of every bit of it. And if you haven't done it, what are we doing? Right? I don't know. Listen, I'm just talking to you. We're sharing ideas. You do what makes you do go, what makes your world go round and round. But what I know is whether it's the IRA, which is the best in the planet, gold and silver, crypto, the whole bit, or whether you use the premium custody account, which is a great place to do a long-term hold. If you're a long-term holder of your assets, you're going to get the same level of institutional grade custody that you get with your IRA. So why wouldn't you want to do it? And then you get the safe protections that they've put into place, which creates a closed loop system. So God forbid if you were attacked, what makes the PCA so special with this closed loop system is that if you're hacked, it goes in as cash and crypto. You trade on the platform just like you would anything else, 24/7, 365. But when you come out, you got to come out as cash, and it can only go to your US checking account. You cannot send your crypto from the platform, from the PCA, to another crypto exchange. And that's done intentionally to remove that bad actor attack vector away from you and I. That's what that's all about. So if you're looking for long-term peace of mind with your digital assets, this is a great place to find it. iTrustCapital.com/XRP Army. Get started today and tell them I sent you when you talk to them. Ushering in the new financial system, ladies and gentlemen, when money printing, debt monetization, and QE converge, the result isn't prosperity. It's devaluation measured in gold. And Gold Telegraph is absolutely right on this one. And ushering in the new financial system requires a revaluation of the old one. Some people don't like to hear it, but that's the way it happens. Nobody just puts something new in place unless something old is cracking and breaking. Here's more signals of stress cracks showing up in the global markets. China holdings of U.S. Treasury securities are now at a 17-year low, 45% lower than its peak in 2013. You don't hear about this often in the mainstream. You certainly do not. But trust me when I tell you that there's a great relationship between Japan, China, and the rest of the world's governments because we're all connected at the hip. And when you see them diminishing their position in US treasuries, it really simply means we don't want any, right? And that's why you're coming out with private issuers of stable coins to soak up all the bonds that all the countries are trying not to hold to harm all of us. And here is a clip of straight fire right here. Shout out to Georgios Vlachos from Axelar and Paul Barron and the other gentleman here from Midas discussing earning yield on your XRP up to 10%. Take a listen to this.
I mean, I look at this because we've already seen a very successful DAT launch within the ETH ecosystem, and we haven't seen any kind of yields that compare to this. So immediately you're going to talk about institutional adoption, probably at scale. Obviously, that's going to put some pressure on XRPL in general. Georgios, do you think XRPL, the ecosystem, can handle this?
I mean, the technology is great, right? It's, as Dennis mentioned, it's way cheaper than ETH. You should be able to reduce the barrier of entry. You can have smaller users for a lot of the protocols that we're going to be launching. And, you know, historically, XRPL has been running for, I believe, 12 years. It's one of the oldest chains, older than Ethereum. I mean, I have no doubt that it will be able to rise up to the challenge.
All right.
No, but even more importantly, I think this is actually from a vision perspective and from the core ethos extremely aligned with the XRP ecosystem. Ultimately, when you think of the Internet of Value, tokenization and stablecoins play an extremely central of this. And I think this is exactly the ingredient that will help the ecosystem get to the next step. And we're very excited to partner this. We feel like brothers and siblings from a different universe. We work on exactly on those things day in, day out. And we've been trying for a long time to find the right partners to make it happen. And it certainly feels like a match made in heaven. I
think we're going to see some similar dynamics to what happened on Ethereum back in the day, right? So initially on Ethereum, there were no yields. Now you see extremely high yields for like even stable coins, right? Which traditionally it's very hard to get these high yields on stable coins. We expect something similar to happen on XRPL. So once XRP launches and has these high yields, and there are lending protocols where you can get loans against MXRP, the loans can be in all kinds of assets, and the lending rates are going to rise and converge to the borrow rate or to the interest rate embedded into MXRP. So the fact that MXRP will have these high rates and will be widely embedded across DeFi will also raise yields for RLUSD, for depositing XRP, just vanilla XRP into lending protocols, for tokenized RWAs. Now they'll suddenly have yield, right? So as we saw in Ethereum, once you have an asset that has high yields, this draws the yields across the DeFi ecosystem for all assets much higher, right? So don't be surprised if, as this grows, we start seeing high yields on XRPL for RWAs that traditionally have no way to access yield in the traditional world. As Dennis said, XRPL will be the biggest chain for RWAs, and we're here to create all these opportunities and grow the ecosystem together.
Well, definitely it's going to grow. I'm looking at Midas. You're sitting at TVL around 365 and growing. Obviously, you look at Axelar holding in the billion. So if you're brothers, this is definitely a good brotherly competition right there in terms of opportunity.
It's worth adding that we haven't added all of our assets in circulation yet to DeFi Llama. So we're actually sitting at $1 billion right now.
Wow. So they're sitting, Midas is sitting at $1 billion also, as Axelar is. Look, I got to be honest, this is all exciting. And obviously be careful with anything new that you test out, that you want to take advantage of. These things are very tricky, but they're brand new. But it's exciting because it's where the world is going. And speaking of where the world is going, stablecoin race heats up in Asia. This week saw the launch of the first regulated Chinese yuan stablecoin for global FX markets, not just in their own country, alongside of the Korean won stablecoin out of South Korea. So again, things are moving quickly. And remember, it's not just pressure from BRICS nations, which is very real and mounting. Take a quick listen to this reminder.
What's going on now? A couple other threads here. The BRICS are not working on an alternative currency. They are working on an alternative payment system. That payment system is different than a currency. They're working on rails, fiber optic cable, custodians, settlement, clearance, etc., for local currency transactions in rubles and yuan and Brazilian reais and other local currencies, but also dollar transactions. They still transact in dollars. They don't want to transact through a settlement system that the U.S. can interdict. So they've created their own settlement system, their own clearance, their own custodians, etc., which you could even have, which could basically be used for any currency. So the BRICS don't need another currency, and here's why: they already have one. It's gold. In other words, so you're Russia, you're selling a bunch of oil and natural gas to China, you're getting paid in yuan. You're China, you're selling a bunch of manufactured goods to Russia, you're getting paid in rubles. There's
There you have it right there. Look, they already have a new payment system. We're not waiting for anything else. This is going down. So now listen, take a look at this. Europe's enterprise DLT push has entered a new phase, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yes, it has. Ever since MICA dropped, the fog around what's allowed and what's coming has started to lift. There's no more asking when regulation, they're here. And they're already shaping which chains are getting picked. For years, firms are scrambling for clarity, and here we are now, and the same names keep popping up, whether it's Quant, working on ECB on digital euro, XLM as MICA approved DLT for stablecoins, XRP with VASP approval, virtual asset service provider from Bank of Ireland. HBAR uses 6 groups BME, Iberclear. It's no surprise to see these names which dominate fintech standardization and DLT trending here. And I say that's absolutely spot on, but it gets even better. You guys remember these old photos right here of Christine Lagarde when she was the managing director of the IMF, of course. But just as a refresher, before we get to the immediate news, I want you to understand that, there's been connections forever with Christine Lagarde, whether it was at the IMF when Brad Garlinghouse was there talking to all the central banks of the world and her when she was the managing director there, or whether when she said this too.
Anything that is using distributed ledger technology, whether you call it crypto assets, currencies, or whatever, and it's far from the bitcoins that we used to talk about a year ago.
So it's far from the bitcoins we used to talk about a year ago, right? Then you can see all the meetings. There's Christine Lagarde right there, right? You can see all the connections here. Brad here, Christine Lagarde. There's so many others I could point out in here, obviously. But for the sake of moving through all of this, let's just go this way. So remember when Christine Lagarde also said this back in the day?
It will not be between those who are disrupted and those who survive, but it will be between those who are cannibalized because they are not seeing it coming and they're not embracing it, and those who self-induce that cannibalization. And I'm using cannibalization on purpose because it's a bit of a striking, horrible word. But it's really what it means. It's you're going to disrupt your business model, you're going to change it, you're going to reduce your cost, you're going to expedite your transactions, and you're going to continue to inspire confidence because you will build that on the basis of an existing backbone, which is your bank and the confidence relationship that you've established with your customers. So that's where I see changes happening now. If you think of Circle and Ripples and all those, that's where they are active and helpful.
There we go. You think of Circle and Ripple, that's where they are active and helpful, right? And that is now the European Central Bank president, right? The EU ministers have just reached an agreement, by the way, this past Friday on a digital euro roadmap, ladies and gentlemen, including the tokens holding mint. Digital euro aims to become an alternative to the US-based Visa MasterCard systems with an electronic wallet. This is getting good, ladies and gentlemen. The pressure now from the Clarity Act the Genius Act being passed, the EU realizes we will be dominated if we don't get out here and get a presence. And remember, speaking of a presence, let's talk about this. Cassie Craddock from Ripple's managing director of UK and Europe confirmed that they launched a euro-backed stablecoin on the XRP Ledger. Take a listen.
Innovative use cases on the back of that. So, we partnered with SocGen Forge, one of the leading banks here in France, firstly around custody, but now more broadly on issuing their Euro CV stablecoin on XRPLedger. There are other, many other use cases that we're partnering, well, our customers are partnering with us on around money market funds and bringing those on chain. And we're actually seeing that trend continue to increase as we start to see more institutional interest in this space.
There you have it right there. We're already doing it. The question is will we be doing it for the EU on the government level, ladies and gentlemen? So now that we're wondering, what is this going to get done on? Let's listen to Christine Lagarde talk present day, right? Present day. Let's listen to her talk about what's going on as the president of the European Central Bank and this digital euro. Listen to what she says.
March towards independence.
What does that independence mean?
Okay, what I mean by that is we should not be exclusively focused on what is happening on the other side of the pond. And we should focus on the strength that we have at home and how we can regain a degree of independence that we don't have. And that applies to defense, it applies to trade, of course, it applies to finance. And from my perspective, it applies to the way money moves around Europe. So by that, I mean capital markets, which are completely scattered all over Europe and which have to be better organized, more consolidated, converging, and possibly singly supervised. That's one thing. The second thing, which I think is really important for all of us, is to have digital payment under our control. When you think of it at the moment, a lot of our digital payment, when you pay, when you e-commerce or peer-to-peers or you use your card or your phone, you always rely on non-European infrastructure. So I think the controlling
Explain
our
that to
digital
me,
payments.
because I wasn't aware of this. I presumed we were
Yeah.
all...
Whether you use a card or whether you use a phone, typically it goes through Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Alipay. Where are all those coming from? Well, either the US or China. And the whole sort of infrastructure mechanism that allows for the payment, credit and debit, is not
I'm
a
bit
European
concerned about
solution.
this. I didn't realize this because it means that every time I use my credit card or use my phone, that information about me is leaving the European Union and going to the United States. I thought that was not permitted.
I'm sure they do that, in compliance with European regulations. But yes, that is the point.
Okay, and well, if that is the point, then let's go back just a couple frames and hear this phrase.
Confidence relationship that you've established with your customers. So that's where I see changes happening now. If you think of Circle and Ripples and all those, that's where they are active and helpful.
That's where they're active and helpful, the Circle and Ripples of the world. So, when we look at a chart like this and say XRP price will be $5 by the end of October, I say that's fantastic. That's like an appetizer to where we're going. So, I love it. I'm excited about it. We can't get to the next highest mark until we go beyond this one. But the reality for me is that what is in front of us is the world adopting a new financial system for which the XRP Ledger, Ripple, Circle, and others are smack dab in the middle of. I like it. And I'm loving our odds. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. I'll catch all of you on the next one.